The president takes time out to distract us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio to all of a sudden say, forget all the other stuff going on. I'm going after the guns and the crime. An organization that helped President Trump do some of the most seminal criminal justice reform over the years. Randy Peterson is on with us. Randy, thanks for coming back on the program. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Good, sir. Thank you for having me back.
So I think the president's speech that which we could follow was a little thin on details, and that's usually the case with this stuff. I'm going to get the guns, and then it's up to the attorney general to what did Merrick Garland say? Keep them out of the hands of the wrong people. Is that the most dangerous phrase in America over the last 10 or 15 years?
Yes, and this whole thing was really a thinly veiled move to fire the first salvo of the administration's switch towards gun control. Even when the framing of the crime that we've seen in all of these cities as gun violence rather than what it is crime, it goes to that fact. And that's an area that, the left is always weak on is law and order and fighting crime. But they're really good at, grabbing guns or coming up with other forms of gun legislation.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, you've worked in law enforcement, Randy. You've been a police officer. You've been an investigator. You understand law enforcement. And I know so many of my friends just say cop. I prefer law enforcement officer because it brackets the job into what it is. We in parts of Virginia have seen a 40% decline in the ranks of law enforcement officers in the last year and a half. How is this going to work if now we're going to take all the law-abiding citizens' firearms away, which is what it's always going to be the case in this stuff, and we have 40% decline in law enforcement ranks?
It could end up being a dystopian environment. I mean, it's a little bit scary what they've done to policing. As you pointed out, the rise in crime rates has a whole bunch of factors, but one of the biggest ones is the lack of law enforcement pressure on criminals, because police are no longer doing proactive policing. Who would stick their neck out under the criminal and civil liability that they're exposed to right now in fear of being the next star in a viral video if they make a mistake or if they do the right thing and it's just perceived as politically unpopular?
We see this, and I had a fellow call me the other day. He had to call Charlottesville's constabulary, and a police officer came along with I presume, one of these, socialist, not socialist, but what's the phrase? All of a sudden I'm grappling for it, is these resource officer.
Social worker, right.
Social worker, thank you. And who didn't do anything, but I don't know, are these like the old commissars in the Soviet Union? They're political officers sent out with the soldiers to make sure they're not abandoning the government's edicts?
I think that there's a move towards not bringing a socialist with the police officers yet, but
yeah.
but bringing social workers into the policing spectrum. I guess that the more tools that are available to police, the better in the grand scheme of things. But the left is very much pushing for that as a replacement to policing. None of these extra ideas, that have been proposed by the left should impact the enforcement capacity of policing, right? You can't. It's not, well, we're going to cut policing in half and then replace that half with social workers because they can do some of the job that the police do. It just doesn't work that way. It's not a one-to-one or any sort of fractional calculation that you can do that. We need policing to be stronger and larger than it is now, better. I mean, I think we can all agree that any part of government can be improved. We can certainly do that, but not at the expense of, but not expanding policing into these other areas and then call it something it's not, because it's really not policing. They don't have the ability or authority to do what police officers are tasked with doing.
TexasPolicy.com is the website. It's Texas Public Policy, right on crime, part of it. Randy Peterson. Can I hang on to you, Randy? Because I want to talk about Trojan horses in a little bit when we come back. Can we hold on to you?
Sure, absolutely.
Where Central Virginia comes for world-class news and analysis since 2001. Seville 107.5 and 1260 WCHV. Well,
Joe Thomas in the morning and visiting with Randy Peterson from the group Right on Crime. Randy, you have a background in law enforcement investigations as well as working now on, true criminal justice reform. Here we go again, in my view anyway, and you tell me what you think about this, because I still think this is a Trojan horse to, again, gain more tyrannical oversight over our lives, because we just are going to make a bollocks of it. If they really wanted to do something, we'd go back to trying to figure out how to fight the violence, not the gun. That's what they always do. They say gun violence, and they focus on the inanimate object that's never going to vote for them, and they ignore the perpetrator of the violence in so many cases.
Yes, exactly. It's really easy to convince people that a gun without a serial number or with a stabilizing brace is what's wreaking havoc in their communities, and then ignore the actual cause of it, which is criminals and primarily criminal gangs. The left is always very good at coming up with new forms of gun control, different ways to, destroy the Second Amendment. But they are not good at, law and order or coming up with ways to combat actual crime. So they've chosen what their strong point is, and they're hoping that, the general public will buy it.
So, and I guess maybe it's because it's so hard to actually go back and start finding, the heart of the violence, which is our choices. Humans make the choice to steal from each other. But the United States was founded on the idea of, if you buy a piece of property, it's yours, you're sovereign on it. We had an incident on one of our transmitter sites where our chief engineer found 2 separate campsites set up with tents and everything in the field around the transmitter tower. And when he told the kid to go, with a police officer there, the guy's answer was, "Well, where am I supposed to go?" As if that's the owner of the property's issue. Are we developing a society that views the ownership of property as an affront to society? Because I think when I listen to folks like Kamala Harris, a former attorney general, I think that's where we're headed, is the idea that owning property is either racist or criminal behavior in and of itself and should be broken down.
Sure. When you frame it that way, that would be a good entry point for that kind of a discussion on the left, to say, maybe we shouldn't have personal property anymore, and that's kind of scary. And we saw that down in Texas. Obviously, the state is a pretty red state, but we have pockets of that kind of activity, primarily in Austin. And when they did that, when they removed a ban on camping, they allowed these homeless encampments to pop up, or to sleep on the street right in front of your business, and all of these things, with really no regard to the taxpaying citizen or to the business owner. Everything was focused on making sure that the homeless could do what they want, and it has become a serious mess there.
Well, I think it's somewhat ironic. We went through the same thing here in Charlottesville, and I think the University of Texas plays the University of Virginia in a baseball game tonight. I'm not. I think I heard something about that, Randy. But yeah, it's a very, very similar case in point there. What can we do? I mean, I don't know if we can hang on till the 2022 midterms for this. Is there a point where we push Joe Manchin too far and he actually switches parties and puts Mitch McConnell back in charge of the Senate?
That would be one way to disrupt anything that was going to happen in the Senate. But I think from a crime standpoint, from bringing these crime rates down, what we need to do as the general public is let law enforcement know that they're supported. right? They're not getting that support from their local government units, right? You have city council members attacking their own police departments or mayors. You have Maxine Waters and the squad, shouting for defunding the police or telling rioters to get more confrontational. They're not feeling that support. We need them to get back to doing proactive policing, but they won't do that without the public's support. That's what they need. And that is how you'll bring the crime rates down. When you go back to proactive policing, where the police officers are out there actively seeking criminals to prevent crime and to arrest criminals that have committed crimes, when they're doing that again, because they're confident that they have the backing of the public, that's when we'll see crime rates go down. Right now, there's no law enforcement pressure on these gangs or other criminals.
Yeah. And let me ask you really, really quick, last one for you. We have a minute left, Randy. We see New York mayoral's race, founder of the Guardian Angels wins, Curtis Sliwa. But then you look at police departments where the police chiefs don't even seem to have, like in Charlottesville, the back of their police officers. They talk about community policing, but I don't know if is the Guardian Angels model going to wind up being, what gets born nationwide again?
That would be an interesting event. The part, though, that you just pointed out, which is interesting, is that in all of these major cities, the chief of police is appointed by the mayor and or the city council, the governing body there. So they're really a political figure in the body of that governing unit. So they don't, because all of those are almost all Democratic or far left institutions in all of these large cities, the chief of police being a political animal there really is not in line with the rank and file law enforcement officer, who generally is a center right or farther right philosophy. So it's really hard to align those. So, like you said, the top can be speaking, and the rubber meets the road is where it happens, and they're not in alignment.
Randy Peterson, it's TexasPolicy.com, right on crime. Thank you so much for your time this morning, sir.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.